For nearly a century after the Crusaders captured Jerusalem, the Muslim world was paralyzed. It lacked a unified front against its external enemies, broken instead into small, competing factions, and exhausted by decades of internal fighting and political betrayals. Reclaiming the Holy City meant overcoming a deeply entrenched, heavily fortified Crusader stronghold that had spent 90 years cementing its defensive footprint in stone. Far from the capital's royal courts, a young man named Salahuddin was undergoing a very different kind of education. He avoided palace politics, spending his youth in military camps. Here, he learned the realities of cavalry tactics and warfare under the strict command of his uncle, the veteran general Shirkuh. While regional governors squabbled over temporary political scraps, Salahuddin was internalizing a model of military governance. In the camps, he learned to organize, provision, and maintain the loyalty of thousands, the specific organizational systems required to eventually anchor a unified state. His first real test came when Shirkuh was ordered to march across the desert and secure Egypt. The veteran general brought his nephew along for the invasion, but as they approached, the scale of the opposition became clear. Facing a massive Egyptian defense force, several seasoned commanders in Shirkuh's camp panicked. They urged the general to call off the attack and immediately retreat to safety. Instead of pulling back, the 30-year-old Salahuddin stepped into the command tent and shamed the retreating officers. He demanded they stand their ground, drew his sword, and led a high-speed cavalry charge that shattered the enemy lines. The victory secured Egypt, and Shirkuh was named its new governor. The triumph, however, was brief. Just 2 months later, Shirkuh died suddenly, leaving a massive power vacuum. At only 32 years old, the generals elected Salahuddin to take supreme command. Egypt transformed Salahuddin. He had proven he could absorb his mentor's tactical brilliance and, more importantly, command a room of veteran generals who were ready to fold. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away in the capital of Damascus, the overarching ruler of the Muslim world, Sultan Nuruddin Zengi, passed away. His death left the entire empire in the hands of an 11-year-old child. The empire instantly fractured. Military leaders turned on each other, plunging the entire region into a civil war as they scrambled to control the boy king and seize authority. Seeing the legacy of her husband being torn apart, Nuruddin's widow, Ismat Khatun, took desperate action. She smuggled a letter out of the capital, sending it directly to the governor of Egypt, Salahuddin. Infuriated by the betrayal of Nuruddin's legacy, Salahuddin mobilized immediately. He marched his veteran forces at breakneck speed out of Egypt, heading straight for the chaos in Damascus. The massive siege everyone expected never happened. The corrupt governors were terrified by his tactical reputation, and their forces simply melted away. The citizens opened the gates, and he walked into the capital without firing a single siege weapon. By the age of 37, Salahuddin had taken control of the empire's heartland. He won it without a single mass execution. He won it by presenting himself as the only disciplined, reliable anchor in a sea of complete political collapse. As the new sultan, his generals expected an immediate strike on the Crusader strongholds. Instead, Salahuddin signed a multi-year peace treaty with them. He understood a vital truth: a fractured military cannot sustain war. He had to eliminate internal borders, merging factions under a single command. But territory was only half the equation. He deployed scholars into these provinces, teaching the next generation the necessity of reclaiming Jerusalem. This aggressive consolidation of power made him massive internal enemies. The resistance peaked when a group of elite assassins, known as the Hashashin, infiltrated his military camp, attacking Salahuddin in his own tent before his guards could cut them down. Surviving these internal threats, while holding the fragile coalition together, confirmed his strategic shift. He had demonstrated that ending the civil wars was the necessary prerequisite for any external military victory. The breaking point finally arrived when a rogue Crusader commander named Reynold violated the peace treaty, ambushing a Muslim civilian caravan and taking its travelers hostage. Almost a century earlier, an attack like this would have been met with disorganized, isolated skirmishes. This time, Salahuddin answered with the full, unified weight of an empire, mobilizing a massive army to march on the Crusader forces. As the Crusader army mobilized to meet him, Salahuddin laid a geographical trap. He positioned his forces so the heavily armored European knights were forced to march directly through the scorching July heat of the desert. Then he executed his masterstroke. He placed his entire army deliberately between the marching Crusaders and the only freshwater lake in the region. Exhausted, dying of thirst, and entirely cut off from resupply, the Crusader army was forced into a desperate battle and systematically destroyed. The victory at Hattin was the calculated result of decades of preparation. It combined the rigorous logistical discipline he learned from his uncle Shirkuh with the vast resources of the empire he had spent years patiently consolidating. With the main Crusader army eradicated, Salahuddin marched on Jerusalem. Inside the walls, the trapped Christian population braced for a massacre, fully expecting him to exact revenge for the blood spilled when the Crusaders first took the city 90 years prior. Instead of ordering a slaughter, Salahuddin displayed strict moral discipline. He granted widespread amnesty, allowing the citizens to leave the city unharmed. When thousands couldn't afford the ransom fee to depart, Salahuddin emptied his own personal treasury to buy their freedom. He ruled one of the wealthiest empires on earth, yet when he died years later, his accountants discovered a surprising truth. Aside from a few silver and gold coins, his treasury was entirely empty. He had given almost everything away. Reclaiming Jerusalem secured his place in history, but his career offers a more specific lesson, that stability is won through internal unity, and legitimacy is held through personal discipline.